Guys, we are now excited to be joined by the Auburn Daily Roundtable crew. Andrew Stefaniak, Trey Lee here with us today. Going to be going over some questions from this week's Auburn Daily Roundtable. Yeah, forget about you, Zach. Nobody cares.
Thanks.
I love you. But for real, though, we got some interesting topics today. The first one, obviously, in relation to the NFL draft. What is your favorite NFL draft moment from the past? And Zach, we can start with you.
Yeah, mine was a few years ago when Jarrett Stidham was there. I'm a huge Pats fan, and the context of that time was maybe the Patriots are going to go after the guy that was going to be after Tom Brady. And when they got Jarrett Stidham in the 4th round, I remember being on a high for a very, very long time. So that's mine. Thought that a former Auburn quarterback was going to be the guy after Tom Brady. So we literally got the opposite of that when they drafted Mac Jones a few years later. But at that point in time, it was pretty cool.
Trey?
I'm going with the whole 2020 draft. Just the layout it was absolutely insane. We were in Roger Goodell's basement for 3 straight days, and it was wild. So I'm going 2020 draft.
Andrew?
I'm going to go with any of you listeners who are around my age. I'm 21. Cam Newton getting picked number 1 overall. For me, I mean, that's one of the things. Cam Newton's what made me fall in love with football. I was 10 years old, and seeing him get picked number 1 overall, it was just an awesome experience. And I'll never forget the excitement I felt for him, and was in my house at the time, and still love that guy. God, I love Cam Newton.
Yeah, I put Cam Newton down as well on this week's roundtable. Just the excitement surrounding that pick, just him going 1st overall, and just how incredible that was. But I do like Trey's answer of that's true. We were in Roger Goodell's basement for 3 straight days. It was awesome. But yeah, I love that answer.
Yeah, and that was a time, right, when there wasn't a whole lot of sports going on, and the NFL is always down to steal the show, and they found a way to do it.
It was really cool. The presentation of it. I loved it.
I liked it as well. I agree. All right. Second question here. Who has more receiving yards this season? Malcolm Johnson Jr. or Tavarish Dawson? Zach, you first.
Yeah, so I think Malcolm Johnson Jr., I'm in the camp that he will lead Auburn, the whole team, in receiving yards this year, unless Auburn goes out and does something I don't think any of us really expect them to do and go get a game-changing wide receiver from the portal at this point of the year. I think Malcolm Johnson Jr. has a lot of traits. And I think we also forget that when he enrolled as a freshman, he was, he skipped his senior year of high school. So he's still a lot younger than a lot of people are giving him credit for. And it takes time in a college program to really develop. And now we're starting to see, okay, this is kind of the year where he is going to be able to turn it on. He's got a lot of natural traits and natural ability, and he's got speed that you can't really teach a kid. So there's a lot to like about Malcolm Johnson Jr. And I think in order for Auburn to move the ball consistently and score points on SEC defenses, they're going to have a guy step up and maybe even force it at times to a guy down the field. And I think that guy's Malcolm Johnson Jr.
Trey?
I went Malcolm Johnson Jr. as well. I think it's going to be close. It may be down the stretch where they're kind of neck and neck in yards, and Malcolm Johnson gets a few deep balls thrown his way, because I think that's what his role is going to be. He may not have he's not the jump ball guy, but he's the elite speed guy that similar to Schwartz when we had him. He's going to be the guy that burns you up the middle. So I think Malcolm Johnson Jr. is going to edge out Tavarish Dawson here.
Trey, you with him? Or excuse me, I'm sorry, Andrew. Jeez.
So yeah, I also had Malcolm Johnson Jr. and I put in my answer. It's hard not to buy into the hype behind Tavarish Dawson. I know we all felt it after A-Day, how much he was used, but I agree with Zach. I think Malcolm Johnson Jr. is going to be the leading receiver on this team. So I went with Malcolm Johnson, even though my heart wanted me to say Tavares Dawson. But I think Malcolm Johnson is going to be great for us this year.
I think both guys are going to get a decent amount of touches, but to go back to what Zach said, I think you're going to have to at least attempt some shots downfield. And Auburn doesn't necessarily, on paper, have that guy on roster, maybe outside of Shedrick Jackson and Malcolm Johnson Jr. So I think you've got to find ways to get him touches down the field. He's got some speed, like Zach mentioned. He's got a lot of likable traits. I don't know if he's going to lead Auburn in receiving, but I think he's certainly going to be up there. So I'm going to say Malcolm Johnson Jr. has more receiving yards than Tavares Dawson. And it's not like there's nothing to like, or there's a lot to like about Tavares Dawson, right? He's got some speed as well. Of course, I just think that Johnson's going to be in the rotation more often. And so therefore, I think more touches will come his way. That's just my thought process there. So moving along here, third question. Who do you think will start at the 2 safety spots this season? Zach?
So I think Zion Puckett is a lock for one of them. You know, he kind of floated around, played different defensive back spots, but that's going to be one of them. And this is a bit of a trick question because I think in base, when Auburn does not have a nickel on the field, I think it's going to be Donovan Kaufman there. But sure. I think they're going to play a lot of nickel. And so my answer that I put in the written version of this, which you can check out at auburndaily.com, Marquise Gilbert. I have him kind of taking the step, took a lot of second-team reps. Zach Etheridge talked about, people kind of develop at different speeds. And the fact that he was here for spring is huge. And so I think over the course of the summer, then fall camp, I think those will be the 2 guys. But technically my answer is Zion Puckett and Donovan Kaufman. But I'm expecting Auburn to play a lot of nickel. So that's why I went with Gilbert.
Trey?
I didn't think about the whole nickel thing. You kind of threw my answer off because I went with thinking Kaufman is like the lock, like you had Puckett. I think they may move Puckett around as well, kind of maybe some hybrid linebacker spot. I went with Caden Bridges with the other one. He had a lot of hype coming out of the spring, and I think he and Kaufman could make a pretty good duo in the backfield.
Andrew?
So I had Puckett and Donovan Kaufman as well. But like Zach said, I think Gilbert, gosh, his tape from his JUCO, he's good. I think he's going to work his way into the lineup. Don't know if he's going to start, but like Zach said, when we're playing some nickel, some different things like that, I think Gilbert's going to get a good amount of playing time this year, and I think he's going to have a great year.
Yeah, I had Zion Puckett and I had Marquise Gilbert as well. And you factor in Donovan Kaufman at nickelback as well. I think he's going to get some time at safety depending on what look Auburn puts out there. But I also said over on the written version over at auburndaily.com that I would not be surprised if Caden Bridges is able to work his way in as that second safety, kind of competing for playing time with Marquise Gilbert. But I picked Gilbert over Bridges, and so I put him along Zion Puckett as well. Moving along here. Pick 5 players from the 2022 Auburn football team and make a starting 5 for basketball. Zach, you first.
Okay. I wish I would have written this down beforehand. So I went with the folks that were a part of Auburn basketball's pickup game against the football team, against the basketball walk-ons last week. And so that was Trey Lindsey, Jalen Simpson, TJ Finley, Wesley Snyder, and Brendan Frazier. And so I went with the guys that the football team chose to field. So yeah, that was my takeaway there.
Trey?
I went a different direction here, but before I say that, when you read the roundtable and you see Lindsey Crosby's answer, he did not understand the assignment because he decided to put baseball players. So
he's our baseball guy. That's on brand.
So I'm actually going to read his answer before I read mine real quick. He went with Joseph Gonzalez at point guard, Blake Rambush at shooting guard, Kason Howell at small forward, Nate LaRue at power forward, and Thick King Sonny DeShera at center. So shout out to Lindsey for being different. But for my answers, I actually went completely off the rails on the basketball side. I didn't go with any of the guys that played the pickup game. So point guard, I went Robbie Ashford, our most athletic quarterback. So, you think point guard, you think athletic. and you think quarterback of the hardwood. So I went Robbie Ashford there. Shooting guard, I went Malcolm Johnson Jr. He'd be a nightmare on some fast breaks with that speed. Small forward, I went Landon King. I was like, I'm thinking of a guy like Kevin Durant who has size and in the middle of on the wing, so I went Landon King. Power forward, Derek Hall, thinking Draymond Green-esque. In center, I went Jason Jones with my center.
I like that. Andrew, who you got?
Well, the first thing I'll say, Trey, you could put $1 million in my bank account and I would not take a charge from Derek Hall or Jason Jones. That's a promise. But so I had the same lineup as Zach, except sorry, Trey Lindsay, love you, buddy. You got cut. I put Capers in at my small forward. And then I had Jalen Simpson at the point. He supposedly, I've heard he's the most athletic dude on the team, and he can jump out of the gym. I have TJ Finley at center. I heard he can jack up some threes, and I like a big man who can shoot it a little bit, so I got him playing center. I got Desmond Tisdale at the 2. Supposedly he's a little bulldog, dribble through you and score at the rack. And then Brandon Frazier at the 4. He's a big 6'7" guy, and he played in high school, so I think he'd be great. And I think he was in that scrimmage like that happened last week.
So the 5 guys, I actually did what Zach did. I just used the team that Auburn football used against the walk-ons. TJ Finley at the point, Trey Lindsay at shooting guard, Jalen Simpson at small forward. I put Desmond Tisdale down at power forward because I thought he was playing a little bit, but if Wesley Steiner was, then I think you could throw him in there as well. And then Brandon Frazier at center is what I went with because, they were out there hooping. They definitely were. I liked what I saw. So that was my answer.
Lance, do we want to bring in our special guest now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring in Michael Pappas. He is here.
My guy.
He is present. Michael, actually, let's go ahead and just throw this question over to you. So right now we're picking 5 players from the 2022 Auburn football team to make a starting 5 for basketball. Who would you pick and why?
Yeah, I just I went for straight size on this one, guys. I'm not going to lie. You need size to compete. And so like you guys were saying, I picked Brandon Frazier at center, 6'7", 262. Power forward, I went TJ Finley, 6'7", 250. Maybe a little point forward, who knows. At small forward, I went with Landon King, 6'5", 220. And then I went linebacker Cam Riley at shooting guard. Little intimidation factor, whip out a 6'5", 230 shooting guard. Obviously, the guy's crazy athletic, so I'm not worried about him keeping up there. Then Andrew or Trey, I think one of you guys said this a second ago, but I went Robbie Ashford, 6'3", 212 at point guard. Either him or Holden, the other quarterback, either one. Honestly, they're exactly the same size, apparently, according to the roster online. So I'm all in.
Interesting. TJ Finley playing the Simeon Bowers role at point forward. I love that. All right, moving along here, we got one more question, and it's a start bench cut. This one for me, it's far and away a clear starter, and then you can kind of debate the bench. But start bench cut: Jartavius Whitlow, Cam Petway, and Jarquez Hunter. Zach, we'll start with you.
The cut was clear to me, so I will start Hunter, and I will cut Whitlow, and so that gets us to where we need to be.
All right, there you go, Trey.
I started big boy Cam Petway, benched Jarquez Hunter, and cut old Booby Whitlow. Whitlow broke the streak of the 1,000-yard rushers. That was enough for me to cut him.
Yeah.
Cam Petway was like what it would be like me on the football field. So it was awesome to watch the grown man run. And sneaky athletic. In the darn Vanderbilt game where some sniper shot him out in the middle of open space. But yeah, that's my start bench cut.
Andrew?
So I went there. You all had Jarquez in there. I cut Jarquez, and a little bit of the reason I did that was just because, we've seen 1 year of him. He backed up Tank. He had a handful of carries, not a ton of carries, had a few touchdowns, had a good amount of yards. But I had Cam Petway and then starting, and then Jartavius Whitlow on the bench. Those guys both just they were our lead back for 1 year, and they were both really good. Different things happened to hurt their careers and hurt their professional careers. But when they were at Auburn, they both had a year where they were awesome at their different years at Auburn. But like I say, I think this answer could change next year if Jarquez Hunter has a big year this year. So,
well, there you go, Michael. Who you got?
I'm very surprised, but I'm cutting Cam Petway.
Really?
Wow.
I'm not certain that there's a place for him in today's college football and NFL. You know, we're spreading things out. The days of the bigger lumbering back with, you know, maybe not as much speed but more power. We just don't see those guys very much anymore. So yeah, I went and started with Jaquez. I think he has the best hands of the group, and the way that they trusted him as a true freshman in like passing downs, blitz pickup, and things like that. I mean, that speaks volume. And then when you add in the speed and the strength, yeah, I went with him. And then Booby as my bench player. I mean, who doesn't love having a guy named Booby on the team? And then the versatility, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who doesn't love a halfback pass?
That's kind of where that's where I struggled with the bench player going, because I started Cam Petway, and I understand, I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of like looking at today's college football in the NFL. Would Cam Petway be able to succeed like he did? Gosh, what was it? 4, 5, 6 years ago at this point? 6 years ago, back in 2016 is whenever he was playing really well. I don't know, but I think that you could make him work in college. And so if we're just thinking about how Auburn would utilize him, I'd love to have him. But I understand where you're coming from, saying is like, there's a chance he probably wouldn't be able to replicate what he did a few years ago. But I started camp. Go ahead.
Sorry. Is there something that you feel like he does better than Jarquez Hunter?
Jarquez Hunter my problem with Jarquez Hunter was he kind of fell off after running all over a couple of group of 5 schools. And he had his moments against Penn State, and he had his moments against LSU, and then people figured him out. And I'm curious to see what he does now that he's had a year in college. I'm curious to see what he does to kind of fix that and take that next step. But he's crazy athletic. Like you said, I agree. I think he's got the best hands of the group. But he struggled down the stretch whenever Auburn tried to give him touches. Now, was part of that the run blocking? Probably. But I'm curious to see what he does to develop past what he did in year 1. And most of it is just unknown for me. He could turn out to be the best guy out of this group. I think that's a very real possibility. And I went back and forth between Jartavius Whitlow and Hunter. I actually benched Hunter simply because I do think that there's possibility for him to grow as a running back at Auburn. So I started Cam, benched Jarquez, and I cut Whitlow. Whitlow, like Trey said, broke the streak of 1,000-yard rushers at Auburn. I was not particularly impressed with the way that he played with the Tigers, but you do like that versatility. Like you said, Michael, he can throw the football. We got to see that a couple of different times during his time with the Tigers. So that's there we have it. That's going to do it for the Auburn Daily Roundtable. Really appreciate you guys hopping on. If you're watching post live, go ahead and follow us on our socials at SI_Auburn on Twitter. You can also follow us at Auburn Daily on Facebook. Guys, I will see you all next Monday for another episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.